eminent clergy, Christian and Muslim, the most senior Justice of the Supreme Court, representing the Chief Justice, Volta Regional Minister, member of the Council of State, the Attorney General, the former Attorney General, and other ministers of state, Deputy Attorney Generals and other Deputy Ministers of State, Justices of the Supreme Court, and other judges, Justices of the Supreme Court, Superior Court of Judicature, judges, members of the Judicial Council, the President and members of the Bar Council of the Ghana Bar Association, the Judicial Secretary, members of the Ghana Bar Association, Vice Chancellors of Ho Technical University and the University of Health and Allied Sciences, traditional rulers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, fellow Ghanaians, ladies and gentlemen, learned colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I crave your indulgence to stand up with me in conveying our sincere condolences and deep sympathies on behalf of my wife, Rebecca, the First Lady, our children and family, the government and people of the Republic of Ghana, to the new British monarch, His Majesty King Charles III of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the royal family, the Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Liz Truss, the government and people of the United Kingdom, on the sad death of the late British Queen, Her Majesty Elizabeth II, who was also head of the Commonwealth of Nations, an organization of which Ghana, as the first former colonial African country to join, is a proud member, and observe a minute's silence in her illustrious memory. May her soul and the souls of all the faithful departed rest and abide in the bosom of the Almighty until the last day of the resurrection, when we shall all meet again. Amen. It is good to be again in the midst of learned colleagues. And I must, before I begin, thank the Bar Council once more for the status accorded me of being a member in good standing without having to pay dues. It is one I treasure, just as I do the receipt of the annual invitation since I became president to participate in the Bar's annual conference, this time being held in the capital of the Volta region, Ho, which I'm told is now known as the Oxygen City of Ghana. There could not have been a much better choice for this year's conference than the theme of Ghana's democracy under the Fourth Republic, gains, challenges, and prospects, in view of the times we found ourselves in, as it provides us with an appraisal of some critical elements in democracy and development, and how best we can steer our nation to deliver freedom, progress, and prosperity for the Ghanaian people. Indeed, if there's any group of people who are peculiarly well suited to delve deeply into this subject matter, I believe we can say without equivocation that it is us, the lawyers, who have been responsible for writing some of the noblest chapters in Ghana's history. Colleagues, 65 years ago, as we all know, our nation achieved independence from British colonial rule. We were the first Black African nation to do so. There were high hopes that this nation, at the time of some 6 million people, would make rapid progress and develop in the newly won atmosphere of freedom. And indeed, we appeared to do so. The enthusiasm of the people, the determination of our first government under the leadership of our first president, Kwame Nkrumah, and the goodwill of the world carried us through the first few early years, even though just 1 year after independence in 1958, the then CPP government passed the infamous Preventive Detention Act, which served to poison the political atmosphere in a manner that was ultimately to undermine the stability of the state and create reverberations in our body politic that have lasted until today. There had been a widespread belief amongst those leading the struggle for independence that political freedom would accelerate development, end poverty, and bring prosperity. The campaign to get rid of the colonial authorities was firmly linked with the promise of development, which was sold to the people to mean improvement in the country's economic and social conditions. Unfortunately, for the freshly minted country, a difference of opinion emerged quickly among the main political groupings. Both sides were agreed that they needed to develop the country as fast as possible, but there was sharp disagreement on the route to take. There appeared to be little appetite for attempting to reach a consensus and framework that would help soften the edges of disagreement. On the contrary, authoritarian rule was the response of the then governing CPP government, leading us inevitably into dictatorship. The early promise soon fizzled out, and our economy collapsed spectacularly. We then tried every form of government ever devised or dreamt of by mankind and more. Those systems that had fancy names and those that did not have any names. We were a one-party state, and we were a no-party state. We had a revolution, a number of military governments that came to save us through coups d'etats, from corruption or economic hardship, or whatever was fashionable then to be saved from. And we always ended up poorer and unable to realize our potential. It was surprising how tolerant we were towards the abuse of our rights, in the fond hope it was a price worth paying as long as our economy would flourish. Free speech was a luxury, it was claimed, we could not afford. We had to concentrate on building our economy, and free speech was a distraction. Those who stepped out of line were put in jail, and it did not take very long for the message to get through. The culture of silence that developed at various stages of the life of independent Ghana was not simply out of fear of official reprisals. It was sometimes the case that such periods coincided with moments of extreme economic difficulty, and people were simply too preoccupied with trying to make ends meet. Many people kept their heads down and quiet just to survive. For many others, the coping mechanism was simply to leave the country. There have always been adventurous Ghanaians who would go and try out their luck in other parts of the world. But the periods of economic collapse turned our country into a place of wholesale emigration. It started in the mid-1970s with a spectacular movement to Nigeria, which emptied our schools and universities of our trained teachers and lecturers and other professionals. It reached its pinnacle in the early 1980s. Ghanaians suddenly acquired the reputation of being the people you could find in every corner of the globe, often not out of choice. I'm unwilling to drag this conference into this very Ghanaian dispute about which side of the political divide won the battle, and will therefore only make the point that after decades of arguments, a consensus finally emerged that ushered in our Fourth Republic in 1993. We have agreed on a multi-party constitutional democracy and a guarantee of individual freedoms under the rule of law. These past 29 years of the Fourth Republic have turned out to be the longest period of stability and economic growth in our 65 years of nationhood. We're nowhere near where we ought to be, but the arguments have been settled, and believe me, this has been a critical bridge for us to cross. The 1993 constitutional settlement has not been without its difficulties. For a long time, we struggled with the electoral process, which underpins the democratic system of government. This lack of confidence in the electoral process has led to boycotts and challenges of results in the courts. But gradually, we're getting to the point where we can go to elections, and at the end of the process, we will all accept the verdict as announced by the Electoral Commission. It is absolutely critical for us that we have confidence in the electoral process. If we do not get our elections right, we do not have a democracy. And for our Ghanaian circumstances, we dare not undermine confidence in our young democracy. I know that having a democracy will not translate immediately into the resolution of our problems, but I believe we are in the position to be able to quote again, as others have done, the great English statesman Winston Spencer Churchill, that, and I quote, "It has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other ones that have been tried from time to time," unquote. We've tried everything else, and we can testify that with all its difficulties, democracy is working for us more than any other. We jettisoned the culture of silence, and with that, we have done it with a long continuing noise. Having nothing to say on a subject was never part of the Ghanaian DNA, and we are demonstrating it loudly and clearly. The media in Ghana is coming to its own, and, quote, "the silence has been replaced with a cacophony that now worries some." I've said it before, and I believe it bears repeating. I would much rather put up with a reckless press than a monotonous praise-singing one. A democracy has no place for a media that does not keep a government on its toes. I acknowledge that we are still trying to keep pace with the changing technology and work out how we deal with social media and the phenomenon of fake news. I am a firm believer in a strong and vibrant media, and I'm persuaded it is a force for good, no matter how irritating and how irksome they can be. They provide the avenue for the other point of view. Someone once said, and I quote, "Two cheers for democracy. One, because it admits variety, and two, because it permits criticism," unquote. And so I say, to those who sometimes ask me whether I do not regret the role I played as Attorney General in the repeal of the criminal libel law, because of the sometimes savage, mindless attacks that I'm subjected to, I say that I have no regrets at all. Freedom cannot be selective. We've certainly come a long way, and this period of democratic rule has seen some important developments. We have experienced the longest uninterrupted period of stable constitutional governance in our history, banishing the specter of instability that disfigured the early years of our nation's existence, and the benefits are showing. We've witnessed sustained growth in the size of the economy, rising levels of per capita real incomes, systematic expansion of the private sector, taken some strong measures to try to protect our lands, water bodies, and environment from the menace of environmental degradation and climate change, ensure that efforts to meet the most basic elements of social justice, high education from kindergarten through to secondary school, and accessible health care to all our citizens are ongoing. Recorded significant reductions in maternal mortality rates and experienced a rise in life expectancy. Entrenched media freedom, deepened attachment to the rule of law, probity and accountability, respect for individual liberties, human rights, the principles of democratic accountability and social justice, and created an environment in which government and regulatory policies attempt to enhance rather than inhibit or frustrate trade, commerce, and investments. May I, learned colleagues, assure you of my full support of the Attorney General in his determination to prosecute Aisha Huang and her collaborators, who apparently insist on flouting our laws against galamsey and illegal mining. I expect, if they are found guilty, that the courts will apply the full rigor of the new amended Act 995, which has increased substantially the punishment for breaches of the law. Despite all the gains we have made in the Fourth Republic, we must acknowledge that we have not reached the potential we should have. The most persistent challenge we face continues to be eradicating poverty. We still have challenges in the performance of our public services. We face threats, traditional and contemporary, to our nation's security and social stability in the form of chieftaincy conflicts, land disputes, ethnic conflicts, terrorist threats, cybersecurity issues, youth unemployment, economic hardships, and corruption in our public life. In recent times, we've been witnessing significant difficulties in the management of the national economy, largely as a result of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the global economy, which has been exacerbated by the effects of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But the basic commitment to resolving these challenges within the framework of due process and democratic institutions must remain unshaken. And I'm confident that, God willing, we will overcome these challenges. We overcame the fearsome COVID-19 menace with resolution, decisive action, and correct policy. And we will overcome our current economic challenges with the same mixture of determination, energy, and appropriate policy. This administration came into office at the time of an ongoing IMF-supported economic program and was able not only to steer the country successfully out of the program, but also to build in the first 3 years of my first mandate one of the fastest growing economies in the world then, prior to the outbreak of COVID-19 in 2020, at an annual average GDP growth rate of 7% in 2017, 2018, and 2019. We will do so again. In fact, in the last quarter of 2021, the recovery from COVID-19 appeared to be on course when our economy grew at 7% during that quarter, only for the Russian invasion of Ukraine in the first quarter of this year to exacerbate our challenges. We will overcome them. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, the Constitution of the Fourth Republic set up a liberal democratic state founded on the separation of powers, with exclusive power in the judiciary to superintend and enforce the Constitution and protect the fundamental human rights of the citizenry. The Constitution of the Republic has decreed that the judiciary has the final say in all matters of the breach of the law, civil and criminal, including matters relating to the interpretation and enforcement of the basic law of the land itself. The judiciary has onerous responsibilities to protect the individual liberties and fundamental human rights of citizens, to act as the arbiter in disputes between the state and the citizen, to act as the arbiter in disputes between citizens, and to serve as the bulwark for the defense of the liberties and rights of our people and for the promotion of the orderly development of our nation. Government has, since my assumption of office, introduced a number of policy measures to help bridge the technology gap in the administration of justice. We've launched the e-justice system, which is designed to leverage technology in the delivery of justice. And we're also addressing the challenge posed by the inadequate number of courts in various parts of the country, resulting in citizens traveling long distances to gain access to courts and thereby weakening the rule of law. Through the administrator of the District Assembly Common Fund, happily, a learned friend, and dare I say it, another product of Messieurs Akufo-Addo, Prempeh and Co. Government is constructing 100 new courts and bungalows for judges in all 16 regions of the country. 60% of these courts and bungalows have been completed and will be commissioned before the start of the legal year in October. The remaining 40% will be duly completed and commissioned by the end of the first quarter of 2023. 6 new regional high courts are also being constructed in the newly created regions, i.e. of Ahafo, Bono East, Northeast, Uti, Savannah, and Western North. 3 of the courts, that is those in Ahafo, Bono East, and Uti regions, will be completed and ready for commissioning, again, before October. The other 3, that is those in Northeast, Savannah, and Western North, which are at 80% completion, will be ready for commissioning by the end of the first quarter of 2023. A new modern Court of Appeal complex in Kumasi, together with 20 townhouses and a guest house to serve as permanent residence for Court of Appeal judges based in Kumasi, who will be mandated to handle appeals from the northern sector of the country, will also be completed and commissioned before the end of October. Just as government continues to implement policies to advance the rule of law and thereby reinforce the confidence of the people and shore up our nation's reputation as a country governed by the rule of law, there are some who have made it their political agenda to disparage systematically the image of the judiciary for selfish, parochial, partisan reasons. These are the plaintiffs who go to court, indeed to the highest court of the land, provide the skimpiest of evidence to back their claims, and yet insist that their claims be upheld, despite the elementary violation of the ancient common law rules for the discharge of the burden of proof that such a result would entail. It is no wonder that their claims were unanimously dismissed 7-0 by the Apex Court. The result of this case is in stark contrast to the result of a similar one in 2013, when the unsuccessful plaintiffs managed to persuade 4 out of a 9-member court to fine for them. And yet, the earlier plaintiffs chose not to wage a political war against the court. Ghana is governed in accordance with the rule of law and not on the basis of political considerations. It is important that all of us, especially us lawyers who cherish the democracy we are building, to say no to such persons and guard jealously our democratic way of life, which we have done so much to bring into being. Independent judges, administering the law, protecting the human rights of citizens, and ensuring public accountability are strong pillars of our democracy. Just as an independent electoral commission, noted for its efficiency and the transparency of its dealings, is one other such pillar. Predictably, it is the object of the same anti-democratic attacks as those on the judiciary. Mercifully for all of us, these attacks have not shaken the confidence of the people in these institutions. Genuine Democrats should devote their energies to finding ways and means of strengthening the democratic institutions of our republic, instead of expending profitless time in undermining them. Now, colleagues, we know that the democracy we seek to build and entrench in Ghana will be consolidated when we have laid a prosperous economic foundation and our people are at peace with themselves and with the world. The democracy that we seek to deepen does not end in casting votes and electing a president and a member of parliament once every 4 years. We seek to build a prosperous nation with equal opportunities where all citizens feel they have a stake. It requires that in our fight against terrorists, for example, who are today on our doorsteps, that we continue to hold fast onto our precious values of due process and respect for the rule of law. The Ghanaian people have resolved to build under God a united nation grounded in democratic values and attachment to the rule of law. We have gone a long way towards realizing it, and I'm confident that with the spirit of reconciliation, fairness, integrity, and hard work, the best days of Mother Ghana lie ahead of us. Together, we're laying the platform for the evolution of a new Ghanaian civilization, which will give true meaning to the foundational values of freedom and justice on which our nation was conceived. May God bless the Ghana Bar Association and us all, and may God bless our homeland Ghana and make her great and strong. I thank you for your attention.